This is about defending democracy. This is no longer Democrats versus Republicans. What do you want your kids to believe in? There must be give and take.
This is White Flag with Joe Walsh.
Hey, former Congressman Joe Walsh with you. This is White Flag with Joe Walsh. Every week I sit down with someone who does not think like me. My guest today, Joan, so many people now think you and I are brother and sister. Just cracks me up.
And I'm fine with it, Joe, you know?
And I'm fine with it, and you will forever be my younger sister, my younger sister. That voice belongs to Joan Walsh, long time Politico and journalist. You saw her in the day a bunch on MSNBC and CNN. She's now national affairs correspondent with The Nation. She writes for The Nation. She's got a great piece out in the upcoming issue of The Nation that I want to talk about. Joan, I want to start here. And by the way, everybody listening to us needs to understand that Joan Walsh and Joe Walsh are not related. I love the hell out of her. Back in the day when I was crazy Tea Party congressman and Joan was everywhere on MSNBC and CNN, we fought and got into arguments all the time. I've grown up, Joan. I've since grown up.
I know you have.
But you are still the wonderfully genuine, sincere progressive. And you and I still probably politically disagree on most policy issues. I want to start here, and I want to get into your article in The Nation. I want to get into the great book that you're out with called Corporate Bullshit, Exposing the Lies and Half-Truths That Protect Profit, Power, and Wealth in America. No surprise, I'm troubled by a lot in here, but it's a great book, and I want to promote it. Everybody should read it.
Thank you.
But Joan, I want to start here, because you tweeted something yesterday that I found very moving and interesting, and it has to do obviously with what's going on in the Middle East. And here's your tweet, I believe, from yesterday. This conflict, talking about Israel and Gaza, has broken my heart my whole life, never more than 10-7. But this move by AIPAC should be more offensive than the ignorant behavior of co-splaying pro-Palestinian college students. It matters more, and it inflames the backlash. Talking about AIPAC coming out and announcing that they're going to spend gazillions to go after members of the squad. Joan, start here. The Democratic Party, tell me if you agree or disagree, is profoundly divided on this issue of Israel, or the left is. What would you say?
I would say the left is. I mean, for better or worse, I think the party is pretty united behind Israel with variations of feelings about it. I think it's become increasingly clear that Bibi Netanyahu is a disaster for Israel, for the Jews, for the cause of peace, for the long-term stability of Israel. I think it's clear that his own personal corruption, as well as his willingness to use religion in incredibly bloodthirsty, incredibly bloodthirsty ways, is making Israel less safer. So, you know, there are several buckets of issues here, but I think in general, Democrats support the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state, and support a range of solutions, whether it's a two-state solution, which I've always favored. There are people now, even pro-Palestinian people, who say that's not possible. We need a democratic state that gives rights to everyone. There's a healthy debate, and then there's an unhealthy debate. The unhealthy part on the left, I think, is really when opposition to the Netanyahu government gives way to really cruel and frankly anti-Semitic opinions, thoughts, behaviors. I confronted two young people who were tearing down those heartbreaking.
Oh, did you really, Joan?
I did.
In New
I
York
did.
City?
I did. In New York City, down the block. I live on the Upper West Side.
Tell me what happened. What was that like?
It was a little scary because one of them was using a knife, but I took my chances and she did not threaten me. But
Yeah.
they have a script, Joe. They say, first of all, this is propaganda. It didn't happen. She didn't say it didn't happen, but a lot of these people, they're not civilians. I'm like, well, they are civilians, and that one is a baby.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't think they have baby soldiers quite yet. Well, not that many people died. Well, yes, they did. And finally, well, Israel's committing genocide against the Palestinians.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not genocide. That term has an actual definition, and this isn't it. And they just, I didn't stop them. I didn't try to physically stop them. But, so there's a lot of cruelty on that side. But let's get back to AIPAC, because I do think that they have a pernicious influence in American politics. And I think that targeting the, quote, squad, when, first of all, they're all members of color, most of them black, the imagery of the way that they've been, promoting their intent to spend millions to defeat these people is very damaging. It comes off as racist, whether it is or not. And there's a range of opinion among those people that they're targeting. For example, Congressman Jamal Bowman has been trashed by pro-Palestinian constituents and groups for going to Israel, for trying to have a more balanced point of view. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has likewise strongly condemned the anti-Israel, anti-Jewish rhetoric of a lot of the demonstration, pro-Palestine demonstrations. So I think to lump them together is just crude. And I think that increasingly making Israel the litmus test for all Democrats, it is dangerous. And then, speaking of dangerous, at the March for Israel the other day in Washington, they invited a completely maniacal, anti-Semitic, anti-Catholic evangelical, John Hagee, which even, John McCain, when he was running for president, had the good sense and morality to repudiate his support, to say, you're a crackpot. And he's on a stage with Chuck Schumer. Whose idea was that? I've literally been asking that question and nobody seems to know. And so, I think it's a very dangerous time. And I think those of us who can see the proverbial both sides, because there aren't always both sides. Sometimes the both sides-ism, like Donald Trump saying, there were good people on both sides in Charlottesville. There are good Nazis and bad Nazis, apparently. That's bullshit. Speaking of, we can speak freely.
Back up, big sis. Back up, big sister. So you are a woman of the left.
Yes.
The left, like me, I'm very pro-Israel. I come from the right. Republicans, for whatever reason, for a lot of different reasons, are very pro-Israel, and I don't want to get into that. But the left, and there, by the way, there is anti-Semitism on the right that we always call out.
Right.
It seems, Joan, like since October 7th, that Democrats have kind of woken up to the fact, tell me if this is fair, that, oh my God, we got kind of a problem in our own house. We got kind of anti-Semitism on our left flank. And they've kind of woken up to this. Is that fair?
I guess it's fair. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say, it's hard to generalize because I've known it was there. A lot of people have known it was there. But I will say that, I can only listen to and try to hear my Jewish friends on the left who
Yeah.
have said that they personally feel surprised and hurt
Yeah.
by the element of anti-Semitism in it. That there is,
Do you think they're genuinely surprised, Joan? Because I've heard tons of that from Democratic friends.
I do think they're genuine. The people that I'm
Okay.
thinking of that I've had heart-to-heart conversations with are, you would recognize their names, and
Yeah.
they are so progressive, and they,
Yeah.
they've fought for peace, they've fought for Palestinian rights, and yet something about the utter lack of
Yeah.
humanity in some of the response. It's a minority, Joe. It is a minority, but it's so ugly you can't look away. And so that's, I have just felt like a frickin' pinball since
Yeah.
the 7th, in the sense of you can't condemn what Hamas did and then say but. There's
No
no
but.
but. That sentence has to end. Your heart has to stay with the suffering of those people, with the cruelty and what it means. And that Israel, I wish it wasn't led by a man like Netanyahu, but Israel has a right to self-defense and has to respond. Okay, that said.
And by the way, Joan, even though you and I are no longer in our 20s, you are
Just barely
a
out of it.
solid progressive. And you say that, but I would say among progressives, I mean really good hardcore progressives, is that a minority view, what you're saying right there?
I don't think so. No, not at all.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't think it is. So much.
Have you been surprised by what you've seen on the streets the last 40
Yes.
days
Yeah.
from
I have
far left elements?
This poster thing
Yeah.
is just barbaric to me. I mean, they're not harming individuals, but when you slash through the picture of a baby or a
Yeah.
teenager or anybody, you are committing violence,
Yeah.
in my opinion. I don't,
Yeah.
speech is one thing. I know posters are speech. But there's something about the violence of the fact that, I walk around my neighborhood, they go up again. That's
Yeah.
good. To me, that's good.
Yeah.
But they come down again. And what I've noticed lately, the people that I confronted a couple weeks ago, they were making sure to get rid of everything, every trace, pull it off, pull that little corner down.
Yeah.
Now what they're doing is, to me, more disturbing, because what you're seeing is that they just hack out the faces and leave which is just
Wow.
so cruel. At the same time, watching the bombardment of Gaza is heartbreaking as well. I don't know what the ultimate truth is, and there are too many people who are kind of rushing to deny the possibility that Hamas is using hospitals, is hiding
Yeah.
its people in hospitals. I think that's possible, but here's my one good idea, Joe, and I hope you can agree with me.
Uh-oh.
What if we, because this is happening in our name with our tax dollars, what if we could just decide Israel can do quite a bit in Gaza? Some of it's going to be it's got to be violent. Civilians will die. I know I sound bloodthirsty. I don't want civilians to die. Civilians will die. However, what if we just left the hospitals for last? Okay? What if we said, yeah, we know let's just stipulate there are some Hamas fighters in hospitals. But what if we just say, we'll get to them later? Let's start in all the places that aren't hospitals. Let's let the hospitals take care of the innocent wounded, some of whom are Israeli Arabs, some of whom are Christians, some, not that Muslims deserve it, but you know my point. It's so indiscriminate. Let's leave the hospitals for last. And
But what if, Joan, the caveat to that is, what if intelligence says that the military command and control center is underneath the Al Shifa Hospital, that their commanders are there, that orchestrating everything right underneath that hospital. What do you do?
I don't think we have that evidence yet. I really don't. You and I might disagree about that, but I was looking at, what the IDF showing what they found in the hospital. It's
Just
not very
stockpiles of
convincing.
weapons so far. Yeah.
It's what they've shown us. If they think this is, evidence, their evidentiary standards are different from mine. They found some guns. They found some vests. That's not a that doesn't look like a command and control center.
Do you concur that ultimately Hamas has to be gone?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Reluctantly, I do, because
Yeah.
I don't know that it's my place to be choosing other people's leaders, but Hamas, I thought Al-Qaeda needed to be gone. I had no problem with killing Osama bin Laden, although, as you and I both know, much of those wars became disasters.
Iraq was a disaster.
But yes, I think Hamas has shown itself to be, completely cruel and without any redeeming characters. And
For the record, I love it when my progressive sister speaks that way. Joan, a political question. Will this divide on the left on this issue of Israel, will this hurt Biden next year?
Maybe. I mean, everything hurts Biden, allegedly. I think it's very hard. I think, on the one side, you've got the forces of AIPAC and others demanding the maximalist response. And yes, on the other side, you do have, a younger generation that I think, unfortunately, in my mind, conflates, Black Lives Matter with the Palestinian cause. The Palestinian cause is a just one, but it's not as simple as, we enslaved African Americans here. We drove out the Native American population. Our cruelties here as Americans, honestly, are of a whole different order. There were Jews there before. There were Jews living there before. It is not a simple colonization
Well said.
framework. It can't
I'm gonna,
be solved that way.
We'll put a wrap on this, and then I want to get to your article. But I'll say something, and then I'll give you the final word. I'll assume the role of defending AIPAC.
Okay.
I'm very pro-Israel, but yeah, AIPAC has. I will say this as a former member of Congress. AIPAC has incredible influence over members of Congress. But here's the deal, Joan. AIPAC is all about Israel. They have Democratic members who they believe are anti-Israel, Rashida Tlaib and the rest. They would like to see more pro-Israel friendly Democrats elected. As a lobbying organization in America, I'm not a Democrat. Bring it on. I'd love to see more Israel-friendly Democrats elected. So I don't mind a lobbying group spending money to have another Democrat beat Rashida Tlaib. Sounds great.
I think that bringing the kind of money to bear that they can and do and will bring is problematic. I think I disagree that they're anti-Israel. I guess that's the problem. Rashida Tlaib is herself.
Oh, Joan, that's as close as you get. Rashida.
She's Palestinian, Joe.
I know.
I'm Irish, and I have some feelings about what the British did, what the English
I know.
did. She's one case. The others we could have a
they're all
24-hour
different. That's a good point, Joan. They are all different.
They
all
are
these
all
cases.
different, and so to lump them together, they also happen to be young, very progressive, very respected by young Democrats and young Democrats of color. And so why pick this fight? I mean, you pick this fight to hurt Democrats, not to help Israel. Jamal Bowman is suffering for his balanced approach to this on the left, and now you're going to take him out from what I consider the right. I mean, yeah, we could argue this is something that we disagree about, but I know that your heart is good.
And your heart is better. Joan, I got to tell you something. This piece you wrote, Unmarried to the Mob, fucking blew me away. And by the way, it's online right now?
Yes.
Okay. The Nation, it'll be in the November 27th, December 4th issue of The Nation. This story of Jennifer Weisselberg, the ex-wife of Alan Weisselberg's son, Barry. Joan, I'm just blown away by it. She kind of tried to tell the truth about Trump, and her life has been destroyed. How did you meet her?
I literally say this in the piece. It was a complete accident.
Jeez.
I was having lunch a few blocks from where I live, here on the Upper West Side, and it turns out she used to be my neighbor. She used to live 4 blocks away from me.
Oh, wow.
And I ran into her at a restaurant on the day that she was evicted. She was evicted from the apartment where she had lived since her divorce from Barry Weisselberg in 2018. She had had money problems. She'd had all kinds of problems. She had a very, very, in my opinion, unfair divorce, but we can get to that.
Yeah.
But she was basically thrown out on the streets with 3 suitcases and a little adorable golden retriever puppy. And she was crying.
You were having like coffee with a friend, right? When you bumped into her.
I was having it was one of those first, gorgeous
Yeah.
April days. And we wanted to eat outside, and there she was, and my poor friend, I hadn't seen him for a while, and basically I'm spending all my time looking at this poor woman, and especially the puppy, because
The puppy.
Willow was, as it turned out, was 4 months old, and they're a handful, and
for the record, by the way, as we get into this piece, because it's an amazing story, and I implore everyone to read this story in thenation.com. Joan, early on in the piece, and this is part of why I so love her, says, "I'm a dog lover more than a humanitarian." Be real. You were drawn to that dog when you first saw her.
Oh, absolutely. And she is so cute. I grew up with a golden retriever. I love them, and she is very lovable. And so I volunteered to just hang on to the dog for a little while.
Yeah.
She was trying to charge her phone. The charger wasn't working, so she could go inside the restaurant and, use their charger, have a quiet conversation, whatever she needed to do. And she was gone about 45 minutes. I mean, it was so long that my friend was like, I have to get back to work.
Yeah.
And just left me there, basically, which was fine.
So Joan, you met her then. You
Yes.
exchanged numbers or whatever. A month or so later, she contacted you, and then you and her, and she began to tell you her story over the
Yes.
course of the last few months.
That's right.
Let's start then. In a nutshell, for everyone listening to us, what is her story?
Well, the public part of her story was very compelling a couple of years ago. In the course of her divorce from her ex-husband Barry, she was learning that she was getting very little money because Barry allegedly only made about $200,000, which, is not a little bit of money, but to support a family of 4
New York City.
in New York City, it's not that much. And they had a very luxurious lifestyle, living on Central Park South, later, in a beautiful West Side apartment. And what she began to learn was those apartments were paid for by the Trump organization. He was getting other untaxed, undeclared perks and benefits from the Trump organization.
Barry was the son of Alan
The son
Weisselberg was.
Alan did
Okay.
too, but Barry did too. And Alan, either personally or through the Trump organization, that's still a little bit unclear, was paying the lease on their Range Rover, was paying the children's tuition at their $50,000 a year private school here on the Upper West Side, was paying medical bills, was paying for Hebrew school, for summer camp, was contributing hundreds of thousands of dollars to the household, but that Jennifer couldn't get access to.
Was Jennifer aware of all this in real time?
She really wasn't. She thought that the apartment on Central Park South in a Trump building, Eric Trump also lived there, if not still lives there. She thought that was a wedding gift. They got it sort of, it seemed like a wedding gift, but it wasn't. It wasn't in her name. It wasn't in their name. It was just something that they didn't have to pay rent on. They paid utilities. She sent Donald a thank you note for this lavish gift.
Jeez.
So, she had no idea that this is how he was being compensated until her lawyers began to expect it. And, Barry Weisselberg himself helped put his dad, I think, in jail in his deposition when he called these various apartments corporate apartments, and acknowledged that his father and or the Trump organization, because Donald Trump himself famously and Donnie Jr., they signed tuition checks. So that seemed to be compensation, not merely even a gift from granddad. And so she began asking these questions, and she began getting very confusing answers. And at a certain point, she talked to reporters, and before any stories came out about her, the district attorney and I believe the attorney general's offices both realized that she had access to some financial information that would help their case against the Trumps. And so they subpoenaed her, and they got her divorce records. And Alan Weisselberg literally did go to Rikers because of the things she revealed. Ultimately, that happened.
The divorce to Barry, did that have anything to do with any of this, or was that before?
That was before.
Okay.
And I think part of what made her story hard to tell is that she believes that everything that happened to her was a kind of retaliation for telling the truth. And it's a little bit more complicated than that, because a lot of what happened to her started before she began speaking out. Although she was privately speaking out about some of these things and questioning some of these things. So it's hard to know exactly what caused what. But, she was divorced. Her husband began a custody proceeding against her, physically took the kids at a certain point. She never got them back.
Joan, I didn't understand that. Why did he do that?
He claimed, and there, some of the transcripts I was able to find are not pleasant reading. He claimed that he thought she was not fit to take care of his kids. Her lawyers put up a different story, but it was very much contested. I think the thing that they started eviction proceedings against her so Alan, she had no credit, she had no assets. You can't get an apartment in New York like that, right? So Alan himself agreed to be the guarantor of her apartment, which meant he was on the hook if she didn't pay the rent. And she had very measly child support, given that she'd been married for 14 years. I think she was getting about $6,000 for the kids when he paid it and before he took them away. But her spousal support, she hadn't worked since her kids were born. Her spousal support was like $4,000 a month. It's just, you can't live on that here. And so Alan was her guarantor. But when she fell behind on the rent, her landlord, who was a notorious landlord, Larry Gluck here in New York, they began eviction proceedings against her, and they changed the rationale. I mean, Joe, I thought I was going crazy at certain points during the story. The way that they used lawyers against her, changed their rationale, changed what they were doing, changed courts, changed judges.
Who, Joan? Like, who's behind all of that? What is behind all of that?
Two separate sets of forces. The housing action was completely separate from the custody action. I mean, it was. But both things escalated after she started speaking out. There's no doubt about that.
No doubt about that. That's
yes.
clear.
And, they got a gag order. Part of why she didn't want to talk to me at first, she very much wanted to talk to me and told me a little bit the first time I met her. But there was, and I believe still is, a gag order against her, prohibiting her from talking about, she argues, about her kids and their well-being. But the court has argued that no, it extends to talking about, for example, Alan and Donald paying the kids' tuition. Her lawyers argued I thought very effectively, but futilely against that. So she could conceivably be thrown in jail for speaking to me. That's not going to happen. As long as Donald Trump is violating gag orders and he's free, I think she'll be safe. But she's terrified. She's terrified of all of this, and couldn't afford lawyers, had fallings out with lawyers.
Yeah.
She's not an easy person, but I got to know a good friend of hers over the months who said, she's a wonderful, kind person, and I knew her when she could stand on her own 2 feet, and now she can't. And so the question really, I think the question for the reader, and certainly for me, was, did she just bring all of this on herself, and or has she been driven to a point of, she's homeless essentially? I mean,
because Joan, to answer that question, who else in this circle has this happened to? It seems like she's suffered unduly here. How's Barry doing?
Barry's fine.
Fine.
He used to manage the Woolman rink, and the city took it back from the Trumps, but he's still working in the Trump organization. Barry's fine. All of the shenanigans with his taxes, that was all illegal, but the statute of limitations ran out. So Barry's just fine. Barry's lawyer actually got back to me, which was sort of surprising. But his answer was vague, not threatening to me, but I don't think there's anything good that can come of discussing this matter in public, since it involves children. And the children are teenagers now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's like, but I invite you to ask me general questions about divorce. And I said, okay, thank you, sir. Why did Jennifer get so little in spousal support when she hadn't worked, since her kids were born? And he didn't answer that question. So, I think that once she started speaking out, they did escalate all their legal proceedings against her. On the other hand, if Alan Weisselberg is guaranteeing your rent and now you're speaking out against Alan Weisselberg, it kind of stands to reason that you might have some problems. And so I think she was persecuted. I think she was also held up as this brave truth teller. I mean, I had someone in the district attorney's office, formerly in the district attorney's office, saying, we really relied on her. Her material.
So is that accurate? If I simplified it and said she's a brave truth teller, is that the truth?
Yes, I think that is the truth. And I think she suffered for it. And the gag order meant that she couldn't keep telling her story until now. But, there were definitely points in the story when I completely thought that this had all been brought down upon her after she spoke. And it was a lot more complicated than that, which is why the story took me 7 months.
God, Joan, it's an amazing story. The title of the piece, Unmarried to the Mob, again, simplifies it in a way, makes it seem like this woman married into the Trump family mob, and then spoke out against it. And she's been excommunicated from the Trump family mob, and she's paid a great price for it because of that.
That is all true.
And I'm trying to think, Joan, anybody else in the Trump family mob, the Weisselbergs, I don't know of anyone who's paid a price like this.
Not like this, because she was a single mom who didn't work, who was really kind of a mark. It was easy-ish to do this to her. But I would point to somebody like Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, who tweeted about my piece. And she was a close friend of Melania's, you'll recall, who helped manage the inauguration. And when millions of dollars could not be accounted for, they tried to blame Stephanie. They made her the fall gal. And it was only because, she had personal resources and a wonderful husband and friends that she was able to tell her story and get out from under the legal cloud that they put her under. They leaked information to the New York Times that made her seem basically like a criminal. So, I think that Michael Cohen is a totally different situation.
I was thinking of a whole different deal,
A whole different deal, but still, the level of persecution, the legal actions that Trump himself has taken against Michael. Michael brought a lot of this on himself more than certainly Jennifer did or Stephanie did, but has also really, sort of suffered disproportionately, and is trying now to do the right thing. I think that she paid a much more personal price than the others.
And Joan, you're a New Yorker, and you've been so informed on Trump and this issue for a long time. He is a mobster, and the family has been like a mob family, correct?
Yeah, they absolutely have been like a mob family. I've said it for a long time. He talks like a mobster. And I think what, the point that Jennifer was really good at making back when she was allowed to speak and was making on CNN and MSNBC and to the New Yorker was, this is how a mob family controls you. You don't necessarily have access to a lot of money, but they give you a really good life, and homes and businesses and cars and vacations, and you're going to Mar-a-Lago, and your kids want for nothing and private school. But if you try to stand up to them, she tells the story of at one point wanting to move to the suburbs. A lot of people make that decision for their kids, etc. And they couldn't because they couldn't. She didn't quite understand it, but the apartment was compensation. Barry didn't have the kind of salary that would let them have a fancy house in the suburbs. He just had a fancy house because he worked for Trump and Trump gave it to him. So, it is the way the mob operates. And there's a great line in the piece where she says, how in every mob story there's always an idiot? Well, that was me.
That was Joan, and I loved the anecdote about Trump when he first met her at Shiva, and here comes Trump showing up with pictures of naked women on his phone from his yacht, whatever, blah, 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 and then he actually hits on her the first time she meets Trump.
Right, and she is already, with Barry Weisselberg.
With Barry.
And
with
Alan, seemed proud of it. Nobody tried to stop him. Nobody stepped in and, hey, Jennifer, come into the kitchen. It was like, no, Jennifer, stay there and sit next to Trump. And so, the predatory nature of who he is revealed itself to her very early on.
I implore everybody. I'm going to implore everybody to do two things. Read this article. Go to thenation.com. Unmarried to the Mob by Joan Walsh. It's just an amazing, amazing piece. It'll also be in the November 27th, December 4th issue of The Nation. Your book that's out now a few weeks, Corporate Bullshit, Exposing the Half-Truths That Protect Profit, Power, and Wealth in America, written with Nick Hanauer and Donald Cohen. I've gotten my way through it. I find it really interesting. No surprise, I disagree with a lot of it, but it is an important book. Everybody buy it. Corporate bullshit. What compelled you guys to write this?
Well, I think we came at it from different directions. I mean, Nick is a billionaire philanthropist who has nonetheless been very vocal about the fact that our tax system really benefits guys like him and not so much the rest of us. He lives in Seattle, and he was at the center of the city's battle for a $15 minimum wage, which was successful. And it was in the course of doing that work that he saw that over and over corporations recycle the same set of lies and bullshit to make it seem like what they're doing is not in their interests, really. It's in your interests. So, and Donald Cohen, likewise, well, not likewise as in not a billionaire, but very much an activist over the years and a labor activist in many ways, who, fighting local fights in Los Angeles would come up against these same stories. For a while he called this the Cry Wolf Project because he was always confronting the Chamber of Commerce, insisting that this regulation and that regulation and this increase in the minimum wage was going to bring devastation not only on the corporations but on Angelenos for whatever reason, and these things almost never happened. And so it was Don who began compiling what I think became a list of maybe 1,000, hundreds and hundreds of lies. And
it's an incredible list.
It really is an incredible list, and it goes all the way back to slavery. And so instead of dividing them into, okay, here's a chapter on slavery, here's a chapter on labor rights, here's a chapter on climate change, what we did was kind of analyze them and divide them into categories of lies. And so we start with one of the most common, which is to deny something that's a problem. Slavery is far from being a problem. Slavery was actually really good for the enslaved. John C. Calhoun, we all remember as a defender of not only slavery but secession from the Union over slavery. We have a great quote from him saying that Black people have never been freer or more morally, physically developed than under slavery. We have coal mining barons saying, coal mining accidents are just part of it. It is the natural course of things that men will die in coal mines, and we accept that. Child labor is really good for kids. We have a textile baron talking about how, people take pictures of the kids working here and they look all scrawny, but I'd bet they could beat up the rich city slickers, any day of the week. It's so laughable, some of it. And once you start to see the patterns, you can't unsee them. When they have to admit something's a problem, one of their favorite things to say is, it's not our fault, it's your fault. Again, going back to coal mining accidents, it's just dumb miners who don't wear the right equipment or, don't take safety precautions. Arguing against labeling meat, for example. A cattle baron says, aged meat is just like aged whiskey. It's better. When you look when you're home and you look in the fridge and you see that your steak expired a week ago, you don't eat that steak, and God forbid you ever open it and you smell. Anyway,
Joan, you, though you're a progressive and you've always been a good, sincere progressive, you're a capitalist. You love and believe in capitalism. Yes or no?
Love it. I don't know that there's a
How would you
better-
describe it? Like your feeling toward capitalism. Maybe love's not the right word.
Yeah,
Give me a
love's not
word.
the right word, but I am kind of reluctantly a capitalist because I don't know of a better system. But what I would say, I am very much a social democrat. You know, I am very
Yeah.
much somebody
Yeah.
who believes, like Dwight Eisenhower also believed, a Republican, like Richard Nixon believed, quite honestly, except for the, sadly, the little Watergate thing. Nixon was the most progressive president. Nixon was more progressive than Joe Biden in a lot of ways.
I know. Don't remind me, Joan. I know. You're right.
Really took for granted that we needed serious regulation to protect people's health, to protect the air, to protect the water, to protect children, that we needed higher tax rates, higher marginal tax rates on the very, very wealthy. I think.
So to me, Joan, it's always been like a dance. Like I'm a free market guy. We do need regulation. And it seems like our history is kind of a dance to find that appropriate middle ground between letting the free market do its innovative things, but regulating what needs to be regulated.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yes, I think that is fair, and I probably would support more regulation and higher taxes than you, but that is a continuum that I think we are on, and I think that we swung really far in the wrong direction, quite honestly, and I think it was pretty deliberate. I think that in the 70s, you can argue there were problems in the economy for sure, but I think we went from having tax rates that supported the very deliberate creation of a middle class in this country in the wake of two traumas. One was the Great Depression, which immiserated so many people, and the other was World War II, which showed that fascism on the one hand and communism on the other were anti-freedom, but could become alluring to very poor people if they were made miserable for long enough. And so we saw conscious steps taken to increase taxes, fund public education, start building more public universities, build the interstate highway system, just collaborate on a kind of infrastructure of opportunity that let lower middle class kids rise and middle class kids rise higher. And in the late 70s, I think a lot of Republicans, but also some Democrats, quite frankly, decided we'd gone too far, and we needed to kind of dismantle that. And we've seen, that's what's led to this staggering inequality that we've seen. That's what's led to the incredible concentration of wealth at the very, very top. Democrats, I think, colluded in prioritizing the finance economy, and those brilliant guys who figure out ever crazier ways to make money and crash the economy basically in 2008. I think both parties really colluded in that structure, and I think we're getting to a point now where we're seeing that keeping kids in poverty is a choice. Sometimes it's because their parents make bad decisions, but it's not mostly that. And I think there's a lot more support now for. We're seeing unions, whether it's from Starbucks baristas to screen actors. I think we're seeing a real increase in the awareness that something has to get better for struggling working people. And we think the book.
And I would just I would just respond with 2 points. I think this is so refreshing. Just because you and I probably disagree on most of this, but to be able to talk about actual policy issues like this in this age of Trump is just so fucking refreshing. The other point I'd make, and this is why I highly recommend this book, Corporate Bullshit. I'm a free market guy, but I love to read things that challenge what I believe in. And this book has challenged my beliefs. Joan, I got an audience from far right to far left. Everybody would love this book, and I just would highly recommend everybody read it, no matter what your position is on this relationship between the free market and regulation. Corporate bullshit, exposing the half-truths that protect profit, power, and wealth in America. Nick Hanauer, Joan Walsh, and Donald Cohen. It is a fantastic book, and it's out now. Go buy it. Joan Walsh, I have one final question for you.
Yes.
And I don't think I asked you this last time we spoke. You and I are not in our 20s anymore. As I've gotten older, the old libertarian in me has softened a bit. Have you changed politically as you've aged in either direction? Like, are you less progressive than you used to be when you were 26? Or is that a weird way to phrase it?
Excuse me, to the extent that I've changed, I guess I've gotten more realistic, which is kind of sad, but, the revolution, not only will it not be televised, it won't happen, and it would probably be a bad thing if it did happen. I gotta say that. I was never a revolutionary. I am probably more pragmatic. I'm somebody who, I supported Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders because I didn't think that Bernie really had a theory of how change happens, positive progressive change.
Would 26-year-old Joan Walsh have supported Hillary over Bernie?
Probably not. No, I probably would have supported Bernie. The feminist in me would have been tempted, but I probably would have seen her as too much of a kind of corporate apologist.
So you've gotten somewhat more pragmatic. You've gotten more pragmatic.
I think I've gotten more pragmatic, and I've come to understand the compromises that people have to make in politics. Sometimes they go too far, and some people are obviously amoral and corrupt. Hillary Clinton isn't one of them, in my opinion, but I probably would have been harder on her when I was in my 20s.
I have a hard time, Joan. Well, coming from the right, my right now is just fucking batshit crazy, and it's authoritarian, literally authoritarian. So that's a completely different thing. When you look at young progressives now, where do you differ with them in broad strokes, or just in approach, or?
I can't really. I can't generalize about them because, as we said, my daughter works for Katie Porter, one of the most progressive members of Congress. And my daughter is very progressive, and yet she's very different from, some of the people that we see out protesting, in this instance, against Israel, but in other ways being extremely hard line on complicated issues, and so I think there's tremendous work being done by so many young progressives. By most young progressives, they mostly inspire me. This last bout that you and I started out our time talking about has been very depressing, I have to say. But it's a minority. It's a minority of young progressives.
Short answer, are you generally bearish or bullish on the American experiment right now? As you look in the future, are you bearish or bullish on America?
I'm bullish because I don't really have a choice.
You're not a dark Irish woman like I'm a dark Irish man.
I'm Black Irish for sure. I am capable of great pessimism, but I fight it. I fight it. You have to get up every day and fight it again.
Joan Walsh, everybody. Follow her on Twitter at Joan Walsh. Read her piece in The Nation right now, Unmarried to the Mob. And no matter who the fuck you are politically, you're going to learn from this book, Corporate Bullshit, exposing the half-truth, the lies, the half-truths that protect profit, power, and wealth in America. It's a really, really interesting, important book. Joan, you're the best. Thanks, big sis.
Thanks, little brother. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, share, and follow White Flag with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been White Flag with Joe Walsh.